In 1899, the Hoosier Manufacturing Company of Newcastle, Indiana, launched a national campaign telling women their kitchens were disorganized. It said frontier cooking was primitive. It said progress cost $1 a week on installment. Your great-grandmother ignored every word because she had already built every feature in that catalog from scrap pine and tin cans 30 years before anyone in Indiana put a price tag on her thinking. Number 8 on this list is a second building that cut 3 months of summer misery to nothing. Number 3 is a workstation your great-grandmother built from leftover lumber that a furniture company would later patent and sell to 4 million women as a new invention. These 12 kitchen designs were not forgotten because they stopped working. They were forgotten because an industry discovered it could sell your great-grandmother's intelligence back to her daughters for $50 on installment. Subscribe, because what you are about to hear is not Hollywood myth. It is the real American frontier. Number 12. The warming shelf. A narrow strip of iron bolted to the stovepipe, 6 inches above the cooking surface. Its only job was holding finished food at serving temperature while the rest of the meal caught up. That iron shelf sat in the rising heat column. Biscuits stayed warm while the stew finished. Gravy held temperature while the corn came off the cob. A blacksmith could bend one from scrap iron in 10 minutes. Most women did not even need the blacksmith. Your great-grandmother did not own a microwave. She had a strip of iron and a working understanding of where heat goes when it rises. That shelf kept food warm. But the next entry kept food safe for days without ice, without a cellar trip, and without a single cent spent on it. Number 11. The PIE safe. A freestanding wooden cabinet with doors made of hand-punched tin panels. Tiny holes allowed air to circulate, while keeping flies, mice, and beetles away from bread, cheese, and cooked meat. The tin was punched in star and pinwheel patterns using a nail and scrap wood. Air moved through freely. Bread stayed fresh 2 to 3 days without mold in the dead of a Kansas summer. Your great-grandmother understood ventilation before anyone called it food science. She punched stars in tin and called it Tuesday. That cabinet kept food from spoiling. But keeping every water task under control was just as important, and the answer cost less than $1 to build. Number 10. The dry sink. A waist-high wooden cabinet with a shallow trough on top, lined with zinc sheeting to hold water and prevent rot. The dry sink stood beneath the window for natural light. A woman could wash vegetables, clean a wound, rinse dishes, and prep a meal without moving her feet. The cabinet beneath stored everything she needed for the next chore. The whole piece cost less than $1 and lasted decades. Modern designers call that an integrated workstation. She called it her sink. Here is something worth knowing. In the 1890s, the Hoosier Manufacturing Company began mass-producing a freestanding kitchen cabinet. They hired efficiency engineers. They ran advertisements in women's magazines from coast to coast. By 1920, they were shipping 600 cabinets a day at prices ranging from $14 to $53 apiece. But every feature in that cabinet already existed in frontier kitchens built by women who had never seen an advertisement. The built-in flour sifter, the spice rack, the pull-out kneading board, the tin-lined bread drawer. All of it was already there. Today, an original Hoosier cabinet sells for $1,000 at auction. The scrap wood kitchens they copied went to the burn pile 2 generations ago. Your great-grandmother was the efficiency engineer. Nobody paid her a consulting fee. She organized her kitchen with nothing but instinct and leftover lumber. But outside her door sat another design just as precise, and this one grew itself. Number 9. The kitchen garden at the threshold, not a garden out in the yard. A fenced plot planted within 3 steps of the cabin door, arranged by how often each ingredient was needed. Parsley and sage grew within arm's reach of the windowsill. Onions and potatoes filled the second row. Heavy squash and corn stood at the far edge. Sweet-smelling herbs sat beneath the kitchen window. Strong-smelling plants went as far from the door as possible. A woman cooking supper could step outside barefoot, pull what she needed, and be back at the stove before the skillet cooled. That garden was not decoration. It was a kitchen cabinet that grew itself. That garden moved her pantry outdoors. But the next item moved something far more dangerous out of the house entirely. Number 8. The summer kitchen. A separate structure built 10 to 15 feet from the main house for cooking during warm months. It moved all heat, smoke, grease, and fire risk out of the living quarters. A cast-iron cook stove heated a cabin interior past 100 degrees by mid-July. A stove, a table, a shelf, nothing more. The main house stayed cool enough for sleeping. Canning season no longer turned the family home into a furnace. Your great-grandmother did not air-condition her house. She removed the heat source entirely. That is smarter than most architects offer today. She moved the heat outside in summer. But managing heat inside the kitchen for the other 9 months required a completely different kind of intelligence. Number 7. 3-zone fire management. The surface of a cast-iron cook stove was not one uniform temperature. Your great-grandmother learned the hot zone over the firebox, the moderate zone on the secondary plates, and the cool zone at the far edge. Coffee boiling on the hot plate, stew simmering on the moderate plate, bread dough rising on the warm edge. She read the iron by the sound of it expanding. She judged heat by the shimmer above the surface. No thermometer, no dial. She had one fire and a mental map that turned it into 4 zones. Here is a second truth. In 1869, Catharine Beecher published The American Woman's Home. It promised to teach women how to organize a kitchen with scientific precision. Beecher compared the kitchen to a ship's galley. The book sold well. The lecture tours filled halls across the Northeast. But everything she presented as revolutionary, frontier wives had been building since the 1840s. Beecher drew from what women already knew, printed it in hardcover, and collected the credit. Your great-grandmother never read a treatise on domestic economy. She could not afford the book. She was too busy building everything in it. She built those systems with her own hands. And one of the cleverest sat right beneath her feet. Number 6. The root cellar pass-through. A trapdoor built into the kitchen floor, dropping into an underground room that held temperatures between 32 degrees and 40 degrees year-round. A woman could lift a plank in her kitchen floor. Below it sat potatoes, carrots, turnips, jarred preserves, and salt pork. No crossing the yard in the dark. It held a family's full winter supply in a space smaller than a modern closet. Your great-grandmother had a refrigerator that ran on the physics of the ground. That cellar kept her food cold year-round. But getting water into the kitchen was the heaviest work a woman did every day. Number 5. The water bench. A heavy wooden bench placed just inside the kitchen door, it staged full water buckets at working height. A woman hauled 8 to 12 buckets a day. Water weighs 8 pounds a gallon. A full bucket pushed past 40 pounds. The water bench stood by the door at hip height. Buckets went straight from the carry to the bench. A dipper hung on a nail above it. A waste bucket sat below. She did not haul water one step further than the threshold. The water bench was not furniture. It was an act of self-preservation. Here is one more truth. After World War II, appliance manufacturers convinced American women that progress meant a bigger kitchen. Kitchens doubled in square footage. The average American kitchen remodel today costs over $35,000. But a bigger kitchen means more steps between the stove, the sink, and the storage. Your great-grandmother's frontier kitchen measured 12 feet by 12 feet. Everything sat within arm's reach. Today, ergonomic designers call it the kitchen work triangle. Your great-grandmother did not need a name for it. The frontier had the answer in 1860. The industry spent 150 years selling you a bigger room and calling it progress. She kept her kitchen tight and deliberate, and the wall behind her stove held a design so efficient that a company would one day build an empire by copying it. Number 4. The step-back cupboard wall. A floor-to-ceiling wooden cupboard built flat against the kitchen wall, with open shelves above eye level and closed storage below. A narrow counter ledge at waist height, plates on the top shelf, spices and daily items at eye level, flour, sugar, and lard in closed bins below. A woman standing at that ledge could reach everything for a full meal without turning around. The walk to the pantry became a reach to the shelf. That is engineering applied to a 12 by 12 cabin. Number 3. The baker's cabinet. A homemade freestanding workstation combining a flour bin, a kneading surface, closed compartments for sugar, salt and lard, and hooks for every utensil she owned. Frontier women in the 1850s had these a full generation before any factory version existed. A board pulled out flat for kneading, so a woman could make biscuits from first scoop to oven door without leaving that spot. The Hoosier Company later took that same layout, added porcelain enamel, and called it an invention. Your great-grandmother had it 40 years earlier, and hers cost nothing. She built that station from scrap wood and common sense, but the way she arranged the entire room around it was the real stroke of genius. Number 2. The galley arrangement. In the narrowest frontier cabins, wives placed the cook stove on one wall and the dry sink on the opposite wall, 4 feet apart. A woman standing in the center could pivot between cooking, washing, and storage without taking a single step. She could reach the flour shelf behind her left shoulder, the water bucket at her right hip, and the spice shelf above the stove. Every piece of furniture was placed for her body and her reach. The cabin was small by necessity. The kitchen inside it was small by design. She had a 4-foot galley and the intelligence to make it outperform a kitchen 10 times its size. Every design on this list made one woman faster, stronger, and more efficient in her own kitchen. But there was one design harder to build than all of them combined. It was never about the wood or the iron, it was about who stood next to you. Number 1. The daughter's station. A second lower work surface built so the oldest daughter could stand beside her mother and learn. Sometimes a pulled-out drawer board, sometimes just a stool and a section of counter worn smooth by small hands. The girl learned to knead dough by matching her mother's rhythm. She learned which zone of the stove was hottest by watching where the skillet landed. Her mother built that surface because she understood something she would never say aloud. If something happens to me, someone needs to know where everything is and why. And when that girl grew up and moved to her own homestead, she built the same kitchen, same galley arrangement, same step-back cupboard, same warming shelf, same lower counter for her own daughter. That kitchen was not a room. It was a language passed between women who never wrote it down, spoken in the placement of a flour bin, the height of a shelf, the distance between a stove and a door. Your great-grandmother designed it. Your grandmother learned it standing beside her. And nobody gave either of them credit for a single thing they built. These were not helpless wives waiting for their husbands to return. They were the last wall between everything their families had built and everything that wanted to take it. If you want more real frontier history, subscribe and watch the video appearing on your screen right now. That knowledge did not die with your great-grandmother. It just went quiet, and it is time to start listening again.